All right. We are set to get started here. Welcome, everyone. I want to thank you for tuning in for what I think is a pretty critical topic at this time, providing training and education during the pandemic, some challenges and solutions at state DOTs. It's been an extraordinary year for all of us to try and grapple with all kinds of challenges, including those at a workplace, but particularly, I think, for those of us that are involved in education and training of any workforce that's out there. You know, it's an unusual year when we start December and the state of Vermont starts recording the highest temperatures in the country. It's only going to get weirder, I'm sure, as the winter goes on. And those challenges are going to continue into 2021. So we're really pleased to initiate this conversation and hope it will be an ongoing one that we can continue to facilitate. And I'm excited to have three really excellent presenters to share some of the learning and struggles that they've had and some of the innovations that they've put forward. A couple of quick housekeeping items. First, just to let everybody know that this session is being recorded. That recording will be made available afterwards. So if you have colleagues who weren't able to make it today, you want to use this as a resource, we will be sending out a link through the National Network for the Transportation Workforce for you all to be able to access it, as well as the other sessions in the series that we've done this fall. So this session is sponsored by the National Network for the Transportation Workforce and organized here at the Northeast Transportation Workforce Center, one of 4 transportation workforce centers around the country, working cooperatively to advance different topics in workforce excellence in the transportation field. We're also partnering with the National Transportation Training Directors Network as well. So today we have 3 presenters to bring their perspectives to this topic. We have Colleen Montague of the Vermont Agency of Transportation, where she's the Learning, Development, and Support Manager. Kevin McVitie, who's the Maintenance and Operations Training Manager at Colorado Department of Transportation. And Elena Naffel at the Tennessee Department of Transportation, where she works as a training specialist. Each one will bring a different lens to the type of work that they've had to pursue since March in responding to the new challenges and issues that have come up, share out some of the learning and strategies that they have implemented, just a few from each, and then we're going to open it up at that point to some discussion of some of the key themes, as well as hopefully address some of the questions and issues that you all bring to this important conversation. With that, to make the most of our time, I think we'll jump right in and I'll turn it over to Colleen.
Thank you, Glenn. Can you hear me okay? Good.
You're good.
All right, thank you. Welcome, everybody. I'm looking forward to my short time to do some presenting on our Strategic Workforce Initiative here at the Agency of Transportation in Vermont. And so again, my name is Colleen Montague. I'm looking forward to sharing some information, a little bit about our agency. So we're approximately 1,200 strong. Unlike some other state DOTs, Department of Motor Vehicles is actually part of our agency, which adds an extra little flavor and nuance to some of our workforce and our workforce dynamics. We're also extremely fortunate to have a dedicated learning center, which I think helps underscore the dedication of our leadership and our legislature to the work that we do and the importance of the work that we do. So I'm going to share a little bit about our strategic workforce plan, which was really developed pre-pandemic. But you know, hindsight's always 20/20, and I think of all the great work that was done in the lead up to this is what I want to share a little bit, which has made us stronger and more nimble as we responded to March and the outbreak of COVID and where we're at now and how we've morphed and grown a little bit. So I'm going to take just, probably the first half talking a little bit about the strategic plan, what we did, how we did it, and then try to wrap that up with how it's helped kind of springboard us forward. So As we started looking at what we wanted to do and thinking about developing a strategic workforce plan, we already work in a really collaborative environment. Our training center has our workforce, organizational development embedded as the work that we do. We already had close ties with our Department of Human Resources, our civil rights. And so we already had some synergy and energy and all kinds of pieces of great work that we were doing. So we took first step was really taking a look at our critical workforce trends and workforce considerations, many which are not going to surprise you. People want things like our employees want flexible working conditions and schedules, that work-life integration. We've got leaner headcounts and that upskilling, retention issues, all those different things. And moving then to our strategic goal objectives is making sure that we're in alignment with what our agency's strategic goals, overarching all that at that bigger umbrella. And we are fortunate in Vermont to have two of our strategic goals that actually talk about the workforce embedded in that. We also looked at our cultural priorities. So it's been extremely important in our messaging and our training and the work that we develop, that we are really, embedding civility and respect, safety, customer service, employee engagement, and quality of life into whatever initiatives that we're doing and training that we've done. So no different with our strategic workforce plan as we start thinking about this. And as this, grew and developed, is looking at how are we going to go about doing this? So looking at and considering workforce committees where we get to bring people from across our diverse agency to the table to have some input and impact on that uses that as a strategy to then drive and prioritize our future workforce initiatives. So a little bit about how we kind of got there. As you can imagine, no surprise, it takes a village, right? This is some of our village, some of our smiling faces. And we also didn't want to recreate the wheel. So we had resources both internally, but we also had created some great partnerships with other DOTs, different conferences. That's why we're here today, right? To get nuggets of what worked for other agencies and departments around the country. Why reinvent something? Why go through the pain points if somebody else has already done that and you can learn from their lessons learned? So I'm hoping to be able to share that so that you can maximize on that and springboard anything kind of forward. So in the chat, if folks wouldn't mind just quickly putting in, do you have a strategic workforce plan already? Yes, no, have no idea if you have one or not, or you think it would be a good idea and you'd like to work on one. So if you take just a second to do that, that would be awesome. I'm not 100% sure I can see all the chat the way I set it up, but I would love to be able to personally go back when I'm finished presenting, just to have an idea of how many folks out there have something similar. So, and it also helps us work smarter as we think about, we have all these pieces, are they making an impact? Is it, we have limited resources, as I mentioned. So whatever we're moving forward, let's make sure it's the right things that we're moving forward. So we started off with gathering what we had, doing that inventory, and then we reached out to our other DOT partners, asking them to share their experiences in our plan. And we used those as a springboard for our plan. Obviously, one size does not fit all. You can kind of see we've got this little tiny green dot in the corner. Different work environment that we work in. We're very seasonally driven here, very seasonally driven differently than in, say, California. And what does that look like? And so, but at the same time, there are all these trends, and it really helped to inform us, helped us to see how others had laid theirs out and things that we could consider. So we looked at some main focus areas to help us identify and stay on task, map those to our overall strategic goals. And it's not surprising that really is that sort of cradle to grave from when people join our agency until they leave our agency. So as we created our strategic workforce plan, and we'll have a copy, Amid's going to put a copy of our strategic workforce plan in the downloadable documents along with my overview of the presentation, because I'm not going to read out every slide. But it was approved and implemented in early 2019. And as I said, it was sort of this cradle to grave from when people came on board into the lessons learned when they offboarded, either from hopefully a very successful career, whether it be long or short at the agency. What were the lessons learned? Why did they stay? Why did they go? And how can we help as we move forward? from there, we decided that as we developed the strategic workforce plan, that there were 8 workforce committees that we really wanted to focus on. And there's a list of those here. And that was our first initial. We decided we run a year-long pilot and see how that, how that went, and then give that time to kind of regroup and look at it again. But to get us started, things that we did were working with our executive staff to sort of make sure that they, secure their agreement, that they were completely on board, looking at other partners. So Federal Highway were actually part of our strategic workforce committees and had participation on many of the committees, if not all of them. We then sent out statewide to our agency. We received over 100 email or 100 applications for people wanting to serve on our committees. And as I mentioned, we're about 1,200 strong. That's a nice percentage of people who really wanted to be engaged in this. And again, at that time, there were demographic issues. Some people felt like they couldn't participate or fully participate because of either travel restrictions or time commitments and things like that. And the great thing about the committee was it gave people a voice, it gave them space to develop and implement ideas for us to help prioritize and keep them sort of at the same time kind of grounded into what our strategic goals were. We had sponsorship at the executive level on each of our committees, and they joined the committee usually quarterly. It gave space for them to be without that leadership so they could dive into it, safe space, have conversations, and then also have leadership to be involved as they move forward and kind of help steer that. And we were, yes, this was a priority. So our outcomes from our first year, we're really, really blessed. And this is just a really short list. I actually pared it down and kind of took a couple of the high level ones. We updated the supervisor eval to really reinforce the commitment. Begins a lot of times too with that supervisor being engaged, giving their employees space to grow in the workplace, develop career ladders, senior leader podcasts, supervisor toolkits, a customized service, customer service training that really spoke to what did our agencies need in the different pockets and had those involvement from leadership in those different areas. And then lessons learned. We learned quite a lot as we moved forward. We definitely needed better communication. There was overlap of some of the topics. We realized that the committee members who were made up of this wonderful, rich, diverse pool also, we had initially hoped would be, kind of sort of in it with us and the worker bees with the committee chairs. And what we found out really was they were more our advisors and our ambassadors. We always knew they'd be an ambassador, take the message out, bring message back in, but that really truly ended up. So we regrouped a little partially through, and that really had benefits to us. We needed to do a clearer definition of roles and accountabilities and our deliverables. And it created what we want to do now as we go into the second year is these opportunities to present to the leadership team right directly from those members who are participating in each of those committees. So COVID comes along and we did do some regrouping, changing. Our committees were about, a little more than halfway through. And one thing that was a wonderful surprise was people who had a maybe harder time because of geographically, and they might have called in previously, they didn't feel as engaged or maybe as invested. We moved to a virtual platform. We used something called Microsoft Teams, and this became a wonderful way for people to share ideas, see each other, and kind of be this equalizer, which was excellent, and share documents. So it moved us forward. And as we moved into year 2, and we kind of reduced and streamlined the number of committees, we also gave us a wider outreach because now people could participate even if they were 2 hours away from where we typically held our meetings in the past. So that, in a way, became a great eye-opener and a great way to get people from a wider group across our agency to the table. So we did, as I mentioned, we went down from 8 committees. We talked about overlap. And so this is where we landed. And we then embedded customer service and civility and respect into the underlying pieces of our committees as a focus that we should be looking back to. And so I know I'm kind of come to the end of my time, but I just wanted to share this really helped us in the sense. So, we took the time as COVID had hit to regroup and then gave us that little bit of time to address year 2. We launched year 2 in the fall, early fall. and moving forward and making great strides on that. But it also allowed us at the same time, we got a request from our secretary to basically said, what is everybody else out there doing? You know, who knows what other folks are doing in response to COVID for our sort of, you know, dispersed workforce group that we now have that are working from all over the state. They're still adapting it and working. And this was excellent. We had a really, really short turnaround time to gather these best practices, kind of synthesize them and report back out to our leadership. We got responses from 21 states and federal highway, which was excellent. And a couple of states were like, we're in the middle of this, you know, we don't necessarily have, you know, please reach out to us again. I just can't meet your turnaround time. And from that, we've gone more what I'll call sort of, you know, statewide, not just transportation, but it allowed us to really morph. And our secretary is heading up this, you know, our secretary and one of his peers from a different agency to really be looking at our new workforce, our, you know, a new workplace. What does that look like as we move into the future? And I really credit some of our work with our strategic workforce plan into being so nimble that we were able to really look at, you know, what are those topics? What do we need to be looking at? Everything from our benefits to employee leadership development across our state agencies and across state government, to social justice, diversity and inclusion, our telework and our workforce just in general. So it's where we've landed, and I left the kind of verbiage there so people can kind of see where that is. But I really do credit the work that we did on our strategic workforce plan initially helped springboard us to be able to be nimble and to react to the times that we're now finding ourselves in. And that has kind of trickled into all of our programs. So that's really all I have in my very short 10 minutes, although, sorry, Glenn, I think I went to 13. And I'm happy to answer questions. I've shared my contact information, happy to, you know, either do it, you know, at the end of this or offline. Please reach out to us. We are happy to share. We were very blessed to have others share with us. So I really thank you for your time. It was great getting a chance to present from Vermont.
Great. Thanks so much, Colleen. Really appreciate that perspective. I know in Vermont in this last decade, we've had two major disruptions impact us, you know, with Irene, the tropical storm Irene, which shut down and the state had to totally reorganize, and now with COVID. So I'm sure that this has moved much better forward with the strategic plan. And we'll go more into that with some of the questions at the end. So again, a reminder, if you do have questions, please just enter them in the Q&A or the chat, and we'll bring those back up to all our presenters at the end here. We're going to move now to the experience in Colorado, and I'll turn it over to Kevin.
All right, can you guys hear me now?
We can hear you, but we're not seeing your screen. Up, there we go.
Right, I'm on a tablet, so I only have so much real estate to work with this morning, so I apologize. So I'm Kevin McVitie. I am the Maintenance and Operations Training Manager for Colorado DOT. A little background about our organization. We're about 3,400 employees statewide. 1,800 of those work within the Division of Maintenance and Operations. The DMO is the largest division in CDOT, and all 1,800 of those employees come through one of the training programs that my team is directly responsible for. So we see just over half of the organization on an annual basis. Prior to COVID, everybody came through the Maintenance Training Academy. We have a location in Golden, Colorado, and all employees would come through that location to get their training on an annual basis. When COVID hit in March, we had to cancel pretty much every single course that we had on the calendar at that time. And a lot of the the shifts that we were trying to figure out were really how do we even shift our programs to virtual. So a little overview of what I'll talk about today, how we accomplished this goal, and how quickly we were able to pivot.
Kevin, I'm sorry, if I could just interrupt you for a second. Your speaker notes are in front of the presentation right now.
Sorry.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, cool. So I'll talk about some mindset change that my team and our extended training partners on the HR side of the house were some of the conversations that we had when we first started going down this road. Our agile planning process, where we really just focused on the first 4 months. We're on the state fiscal year runs July to June. And with the onset of COVID in the spring, we really just talked about some short-term planning to get our program back on the rails and what we needed to do to get things moving. The biggest issue we ran into was some of the communication gaps. We did not have centralized communication with regard to training. We do use an LMS, but we also had to take a couple steps away from that program to accomplish what we needed to. The ease of use with a virtual platform, I actually have a lot of experience in this in my time in public education before I came to CDOT. I've spent almost 10 years as a technology trainer, and Colorado is a Google Apps shop. So we leverage the Google Apps platform, from Google Docs and Sheets and Sites to using Google Meet for virtual meetings, and we leveraged all of those tools to get our training program back on track. We were really deliberate about taking existing content that was delivered in the classroom and putting it into a virtual format. We didn't just take our PowerPoints and move them over. The group engagement piece was the biggest piece of the puzzle that we needed to solve, because at the end of the day, we were trying to virtually train a group of truck drivers, an analog audience. They might check their email once a month, if that. So technology is not something that they were super motivated to integrate into the mix. And then how we shared some of those roles and responsibilities across our partners in the field, some of the supervisors that would help us with training. So I'll jump into the mindset piece of the equation here. What we did, we probably sat still for about 2 weeks in March, just to kind of see, what's this thing real? Do we really need to change anything? Are we just putting things on pause for a couple weeks, maybe a couple months? And then after 2 weeks, I got together with another one of my peers and said, you know what, we need a plan. We've got to be proactive about this in case this does go on longer than we anticipate. So a lot of it was getting our teams together to get the HR side of the house and the maintenance side of the house on the same page with some of the tools that we were going to use, how we were going to approach the problem and ultimately solve it. A lot of it was simply communicating, what we thought was normal, or what we knew as normal up until the first week of March, did not exist anymore. And in order to get all of the teams on the same page, we talked a lot about the growth mindset versus fixed mindset, not doing it the same way we've always done it, and really inventing what the new normal is going to look like. And that had been our charge since day one. And I think that really solidified some of the outcomes that we're now seeing, and some of the early successes that we saw. So that growth mindset, really not only eliminating barriers for our teams in delivering training, but also eliminating those barriers for our audience. So a lot of what we did as we were converting content over was to do like 1-hour virtual workshops, simple things on how to use the video conferencing platform. And Google Meet is a pretty stripped down version of some of the other like WebEx that we're using today, Zoom. The controls are pretty simple, but again, if you're not used to using it, it can be a challenge. So we did a series of workshops just to train folks how to use these tools effectively and what to expect when we actually are asking people to show up for a 1-hour, a 2-hour, 4-hour, 8-hour course. And then making sure that what the HR team was doing and what the maintenance team was doing was one and the same. So we're using the same tools and resources, we're using the same communication channels, and we're being very responsive and adaptive to the feedback that we're getting from our partners in the field. The next step was to really take a close look at our programs. On the maintenance side of the house, we had 11 individual programs that we train on. What we did short term was to focus on only 2 of those. We focused on our new hire program and our winter ops program. State of Colorado, if you've ever been out here, we have mountains, we have the Eastern Plains, the Western Slope. We have a very diverse environment, but the #1 task for CDOT is to plow snow in the winter time. So we focused on our new hire program because that is tied to their training pay, and to get the winter ops training going because we knew it was going to take a while to get both of those programs up and running. So we only focused on those 2. The next step was to really close some of those communication gaps. And we stood up a new website through the Division of Maintenance that had checklists for supervisors in the field, had roles and responsibilities on what my team was going to cover and what we expected folks in the field to cover. We closed the gap with registration process. We closed the gap on the back end of the training with some reporting features that we had built into the system as well. And all of those kind of spelled success on the back end. So again, I have a little screenshot here of our website. We posted these checklists on an ongoing basis just to make sure that our folks in the field were kind of tracking with what needed to be done, when it needed to be done, and how they could report out to their supervisors on the back end as well. So we made all of that communication very transparent. The registration process, we took that online. Instead of assigning the training, the in-person training to folks where they show up at a physical location, we put registration forms out on the website and pushed out very much a do-it-yourself model where it was, and we had a lot of support with our administrative staff too to make sure that the new employees knew what to do, how to access the website and all those things. But we used a Google form to track registration, and then we would set it up in the LMS on the back end, send calendar invites out to all of the trainees. Our average class size was about 125 people on each one of these that we did. And then we launched a reporting page. This was something that we were never able to do in the past because we didn't have real-time tracking. And we closed some of the data gaps in the system and started tracking those completions in almost real time. We probably update these every 4 or 5 days. And that way the supervisors know they can go to our website, they can find out who's attended training, who still needs to attend training, and help us close some of those gaps with folks in the field. The next step was the engagement piece, and this was the really difficult piece to address within my team because, again, we had an analog audience that wasn't super familiar with attending webinars or online education in general. So we took our existing content and built a lot of question and answer, some small group activities, things of that nature to really replicate the in-person live classroom experience in a virtual environment. To take that a step further, in each session that we offered, and between September 15th for the Winter Ops program, between September 15th and last week, we offered 16 sessions. Again, average attendance was about 125 people, but we made sure we had 5 or 6 supervisors in each session. And that way, if there were specific questions that came up based on geography, physical location in the field, that those supervisors could help us address some of those localized questions that came up. And that was probably the best recipes for success that we implemented, was to really integrate our partners in the field into what we were doing. In the past, the supervisors had a very heavy hand in kind of delivering this training, and we didn't want to just cut them out of the process altogether. Another piece of this is there was a hands-on training portion for our winter ops. So we go through pre-trip checks, maintenance after the storm, all sorts of equipment training from the snow plow, wing plow, tow plow, front end loader. We do equipment endorsements for all our operators on those pieces of equipment. So we kind of took the classroom piece of the equation under our wings, and we asked the supervisors to help us with the hands-on piece. And at the end of the day, it all worked really well. We couldn't have done it without the supervisors in the field. So with what we were able to build, we kind of turned the corner in about 4 months, and it was a pretty fast 4 months for our team to take existing classroom content and move that over to a virtual realm. We applied the growth mindset process. We also implemented some concepts from design thinking. And on this last slide of my presentation, I hope Glenn will share this out with our audience today. I have some live links on some of the resources that we used in our planning process and in our implementation process to get this project off the ground. So with that, I thank you for our time. This is really more of kind of that case study and what we did and how we did it. And now that we have these 2 projects behind us, we've got 6 more in the hopper that we're applying the same process to. Unfortunately, we're kind of moving back towards lockdown, and we're going to be doing virtual training for a while. The good news is that we have a structure and a process in place, and we're kind of in that rinse and repeat mode where we're backfilling with other programs and projects right now. So again, thank you for the time today.
Great. Thanks so much, Kevin. Really, really appreciate that. And yes, we will be sharing out the slides and the links to all the resources that each of the presenters have provided here, as well as any that any in our audience might want to share as well in this whole process. A reminder, you can enter questions or your thoughts or other resources you want to share into the chat after the presentation, and we'll come back to those. So we're going to move on to the final presentation. Elena's queuing up here, and I'll turn it over to her.
Hi, as Glenn said, I'm Elena Naffel from the Tennessee Department of Transportation. And we had some things going well for us when the pandemic started, and we had some things that kind of went against us as the pandemic started. We already had what we call the TDOT Learning Network, which is kind of like TDOT YouTube. It had instructional videos, it has online learning classes that our employees can pretty much get to anytime they want. There's channels for different subjects. We had also already sort of put into plan moving into virtual, but we had planned on baby steps, not just like, let's fall off the cliff into virtual. So we had already bought computers and smart TVs, more computers and smart TVs for our individual employees and county shops. We'd already planned to increase our access to the WebEx, which is what we use in Tennessee for virtual communication, and had started expanding training on WebEx. We were thinking staff meetings and those kind of things where people didn't have to travel, waste a whole day on travel just to be in an hour-and-a-half meeting. And then the pandemic happened. And then the things going against us, though, we had a tornado. 2020 has been fraught with natural disasters. And right at the beginning of March, Tennessee had one of their natural disasters, and we had a tornado that marked a lot of our buildings uninhabitable for a little while. And when they became habitable, we forgot to tell FedEx that they could deliver our packages. So we had tornado delays on top of pandemic delays. And some of those TVs and computers took a little while to get here. But we moved through it. We were also in the middle of a few programs when this happened. At the time that the pandemic came to Tennessee, we had already hired over 90 summer interns. We had really amped up our safety programs. Our safety department is relatively young, and we had really pushed in the past few years a lot of our programs and establishing those programs and really getting participation into them. And these were just programs that we felt like could not stop. If we stopped them, the programs would suffer in the long term. And of course, we are also amping up our supervisory training and onboarding, and also our TDOT Reconnect programs, which is a program that we use for our tech employees to help them get transferable credit to get a head start on associate's degrees or certificates. And we just felt like these were things that we had to keep going with. So the pandemic came and we took a breath, took a second. We didn't cancel anything right away. We told our interns we're looking at the available possibilities, not to despair. We told the employees that things were going to look different and be different going forward. We just weren't sure what the different would be. Some of that waiting was to see what restrictions would come down from federal or local governments. Tennessee is one of the states that has not issued statewide restrictions. And as an agency, it was decided that it would be much more manageable if we had agency-wide protocols instead of this community does this and this community does this. To have agency-wide protocols would be a lot more manageable. When Nashville and Memphis set out some of their local restrictions, those are pretty much what we decided to go with. A lot of our employees are based in those two cities. We have over 4,000 employees. So we definitely wanted to make it streamlined while we did that. And I forward with, these were some of the questions that we asked. Is it critical? And we didn't just mean, is it critical to maintaining roads, putting pavement on the ground? We were looking at, is it critical to maintaining our safety records? Is it critical to employee morale and turnover? Those types of critical as well. Is it easy to adapt to our pandemic restrictions? Do we already have the technology for those adaptations? And probably most important for us was, are our people willing to transition? Because for us, if our people aren't willing to do it, it's just dead in the water. It's not going to happen. So how do we do that? And our next question was, if it is critical, but the answer to any of these other questions is no, are there alternative solutions? A good example of this one was our flagging class with safety. Flagging was critical not only to the daily operations, but it's critical to our safety plan. And there was no way for us to virtualize safety, virtualize flagging. So we looked at our pandemic restrictions. We looked at what we wanted to do with flagging, what we had been doing with flagging, and we realized we're just going to have to take it outside. Smaller groups, spread them out. It's going to take some more instructors, take a little more equipment, but we can do this. And then our last question was, does it maintain the high quality with that transition? So with our interns, we wanted our interns, but we wanted our interns to have the same level of quality internship as our previous interns. We didn't just want them to have an internship on paper. We wanted to maintain the reputation that we have with our internship program. So how do we do this? How do these questions, the answers to these questions fall into place? And we also looked at the individual pieces of our programs to do that. And when we were looking at all these things, we found that there were 3 keys to adapting. As they come, getting out of that, this is how we're going to do it, move kind of mentality, just really flexible. And then feedback. We asked for feedback for our internship program before the program happened. We looked at the supervisors that were going to have the interns and the employees that were going to have the interns, and we asked them, can you make this internship work if we have to do it remotely? Can you make this internship work if it's just one day in the field and the rest of the day remotely? Can you do this? And our supervisors love interns, and most of them came back with, yes, we can figure it out, we can do it, we can adapt it, so it's still worthwhile. We did surveys during the internship program with the interns. There were weekly meetings with the interns to make sure they felt like they were getting what they wanted. My intern actually was from Connecticut. She came down to Nashville for 3 weeks at the very beginning of the internship, got her computer, got her equipment, had a socially distanced view of the physical buildings of TDOT and a physical feel for that, and then did the rest of her internship from Connecticut. And it worked great for us. We also did surveys with our safety classes. Here's a sample of our safety surveys. And you can see we wanted everyone to be a part of the transition. These surveys come from most of our safety staff and training staff. How did we think we could with it? And you can see in this sample, there's a fairly varied response. And we also did post-adoption surveys. So some of that came from our classes. We asked them what they liked about doing virtual classes, and they said, we love not having to travel. But we don't like that we don't get to meet people that we don't work with every day. We miss that part of it. So we didn't have at the time the technology for breakout rooms in our virtual environment, but what we did do is, instead of trying to do those breakout rooms or this, we decided to pair them up in their group activities for the classes, turn their videos on and call each other, and really just tried to do those. We added extra time into the classes to account for all of that, and they loved it. We did have to weed out some political feedback in our surveys. The pandemic was politically polarizing in a lot of places, and we weren't an exception. And people are going to give us their thoughts, and we just have to look at what's constructive for what we're trying to do and kind of weed through that. And then practicality is the biggest piece, I think, for us and for our employees. So we had to really look at, does it work? When we put the boots on the ground, does what we decided to do actually work? That for materials and tests, our quality control inspectors, some of that meant extending certifications. Some of it was getting rid of the live instructor. We like live instructors. They're more interesting than videos, but we've already got this learning network available. If you can make it a video, let's make it a video. And then some of it was blending live, virtual, and in person. Like our forklift certification classes, we can do here's the safety guidelines, here's this kind of stuff virtually, but when it comes to the actual, you have to operate a forklift to pass this certification, we have to do that in person. So there was a lot of blending that went on in that as well. So really what it came down to for us was it was about employee buy-in and how could we transition, maintain the high quality that our employees and our partner agencies expect, and how can we do it So then back to you, Glenn.
That's great. Thanks. Thanks so much, Elena. And actually, that's a good launching point off to some of the questions that have come in. And let's talk quickly, and maybe for all three of you, just briefly talk about some of the strategies or issues that you found in gaining that kind of buy-in, whether, you know, Colleen, it was getting people to serve on the committees or getting supervisors as well as individuals to say, okay, I'll take this course online or I'll go to video for it. Or Kevin, in terms of getting supervisors engaged to make sure their employees are buying into the new training regime. So why don't we go kind of back in order and start with Colleen and then Kevin and Elena on that.
Yeah, I think buy-in, it was a critical piece and at all levels. And I think that's where forging the relationships before we did anything, we have to like shift and pivot was really critical and helpful for us. But again, we also did the same thing. We reached out, our supervisors were critical, those on the ground. We also took pause. I think our pause might have been just a tad longer in Vermont, and that was only because a lot of the folks in our training center were deployed, safeties within our group, and so we were deployed to help other agencies and departments to deal with, you know, unemployment requests, PPE, different things like that, and it did give us that time. And also just to reach out to everybody, but the networking and seriously, that's why I had It Takes a Village, because it really does take a village for anything that we do, and to get the buy-in and the what's in it for them and why is this important. Did that answer all your questions, Glenn? I'm not sure if I answered all of.
Yeah, I know it's good. Kevin?
Yeah, I think in short, we proved that it works. And the way we did that, I mentioned the two programs that we focused on. The new hires, they're a green audience. So they didn't have any historical knowledge about how training was delivered in the past. And that was the first program that we rolled out. And a lot of, there's training requirements and training pay tied to their first year of employment with us. And in converting that program over first, we had about 150 people that were kind of in this backlog who they were bumping against their deadline to get that training pay. So we had to push that out first. And in converting that over, because they didn't have any historical knowledge about coming into Golden and doing those in-person classes, we really used that group to leverage success. And we proved that it worked with those guys. Many of them, I mean, honestly, they didn't know how to turn the computers on, much less jump into a webinar. And we kind of held their hands through that process, proved that it worked, and then they would give feedback, verbal or otherwise, to their supervisors, to their coworkers, and that really was the springboard to get the Winter Ops program off the ground. And people were complaining. It wasn't without its challenges, but at every turn we said, well, it worked for the new hires. How come it's not working for you? And that pretty much got rid of the arguments right out of the gate. So I think with our audience, change is bad, but you have to be adaptable. You have to be nimble. And with our audience, as big as it is, you simply just have to prove that it works and show them how easy it is.
Elena, do you have some thoughts to add?
We kind of used our interns the same way Kevin used his new hires, because they also typically don't have any historic knowledge of things. But no, we pretty much did similar things.
Yeah. So another question here for all of you is, as you are looking forward, so obviously you're going to continue in the mode and you're continuing to bring things online right now, but acknowledging that at some point we go back to quote unquote normal. So the pandemic will not be, a crisis issue for us. What of the learning that you've done or programs specifically will you carry? Do you think your department will just carry forward? I mean, it will now become the new norm for you. Are there specific things that you think you're going to take forward out of this? And Colleen, let's just go in order again, Colleen.
Sure. I think there's many, even just simple things like having meetings and having people at the table. You don't need to be in a room and be all face to face. I think some of our trainings, it can be virtual and allow greater participation, especially the smaller soundbite ones where we might have dragged them to a central location. If we can, we will do them remotely. So I think there's a lot of new ways to be in, and it really is a new normal. I don't see us going back in many cases. We also had pockets of employees and work groups who would turn down telework as an option because they just didn't see that their work group could do it. And then when we were thrust into this and had no choice, there was a lot of happy surprises for those work groups, including supervisors, like, oh, my team can do this. And they found workarounds, they found ways to use the technology. And again, we were all getting used to the technology. But I think there's a lot of great takeaways in this. And my last slide, as we were looking holistically at Vermont, is how do we do this moving forward? This has become sort of our new norm, and our new employees were the same. Many of them adapted very quickly. And a lot of folks like this ability to work remotely and have that extra flexibility. So it's already met some of the workforce trends that we were just seeing in general throughout the nation.
Great.
Yeah, and I think with regard to our audience, I mean, I was spending almost $500,000 a year bringing 1,800 employees into Golden to train them. I have about a $350,000 line item for hotels and another $200,000 line item to cover meals. I want to spend that money on training, not on food and hotels. So without having folks travel and training them where they are, it's opened up a kind of a windfall of cash for my team. We're looking at simulators. We're looking at all sorts of other options to roll out to cover the hands-on piece of the equation, because you can't do hands-on training effectively in a virtual environment. And that's why, for the short term, we're leveraging our supervisors in the field. But moving forward, all of the other programs that we're now converting over, we're focusing on that hands-on component, where the classroom piece, we can still do that virtually. And then a week later, a couple days later, whatever that looks like, my team will then travel out to the regions and support those local level supervisors in delivering the hands-on component. And it's going to make us more nimble moving forward. Honestly, this entire situation was a blessing in disguise, and it really allowed us to just rip the Band-Aid off and say, you know what, we've been doing it wrong this whole time, and here's how we're gonna change that and do it more effectively, more efficiently, and make better use of the taxpayer money at the end of the day.
Elena, thoughts?
Yeah, we actually went into a lot of this with long-term in mind. Okay, if we're going to transition it now, let's transition it so that it can be it can stay this way. Obviously, some things are going to be easier, like the flagging didn't transition to virtual, those kind of things. But a lot of our HR classes and TDOT HR training and safety training are very close together, and technical training are all very handled by the same people generally. And it was something that we just wanted to keep doing it. We hadn't even thought of virtual training before this. Like I said in the presentation, we had just thought about using virtual for like staff meetings and things like that. Now this has kind of pushed us to where we're like, oh yeah, if it works, let's keep going.
Yeah. Great. We're going to take just one more question because we're coming to the end of our time here. Just a reminder, everybody will get a follow-up to this where we'll be sending out the resources as well as a direct link to the website where this presentation as well as previous presentations from this series are hosted. So you'll all get that that information. And Kevin, this started with you, but I think it's for everyone here on what kind of promotion did you find most effective for, particularly when you were going to try to close that communications gap. But I think for each of you, in terms of as you did this outreach, as you had to engage all of these people, what were the most promising methods that you found? And since it came to Kevin, let's start with you.
A lot of it was, number one, having a plan, and number two, being consistent with the communication. In the past, there was certainly a very high degree of hand-holding with regard to the maintenance crews, where a lot of the registration, a lot of that communication would happen at the local level with our administrative staff. And in our effort to kind of centralize a lot of this, mostly so we could get a handle on the data side of the equation, we took a lot of those responsibilities on. And then we just integrated those into a standardized and consistent communication plan. Most of it is in the form of regularly scheduled email blasts that would go out. It's a simple tool, but everybody has access to it. And so we kind of worked with the least common denominator in that regard, just to be able to get the communication out. But when we're sending that email to a maintenance worker level 1, we're also copying their admin on that email. So there is follow-up at the local level. So the supervisors are involved, the regional superintendents involved, the admins are involved, and they're now expecting those messages to come out. It's funny, we try to do them the first week of every month. We're a couple days behind, and now I'm getting emails from folks saying, hey, where's the next round of that communication? We're waiting, we're waiting for the next piece of this. So I think consistency, having that plan and being consistent with that plan is key. My partner has a great quote that she pushes on all of her direct reports, and it is as simple as this: hope is not a strategy. If you hope it's going to happen, it's not going to. So have a plan.
Great. Elena?
You're going to have to ask me your question again because my ADD kicked in.
What, in terms of promotion strategies that you found most effective at engaging people?
Oh, yeah. So it was very similar to what Kevin was saying. It was really just getting everybody in there, training them on the WebEx platform, which is what we were using. The more comfortable they felt with it, the more willing they were able to do it. We did have a pretty steep learning curve just because hardly anybody had used it before. So it was just setting up those trainings for them, really pushing, and we found one thing we did find through this is that when we want employees to know something, it's best to tell the lower level supervisors, and communication seems to go better from that end. And just really getting that out there and being available, making sure people knew who we were, even if it was just through our name and email, so that they could ask questions, those kind of things. But those trainings we set up for the WebEx platform, and then our employees being able to participate in surveys so that they felt like they had a voice in how some of these things were done, really helped them transition with us.
Great. And Colleen, any last thoughts?
Yeah, very, very, very similar. I mean, and I think some of it was teaching them the technology from the get-go, and then that helped also, I think, to what Elena said, is like getting, letting them know there as a resource. And that became, I went in and quickly did a how to use Teams training with our executive team early on, and with a couple other key folks. And I know our group got pinged constantly, please do this, as people got comfortable with it. But that created, what else can we do for them? And we also we have a monthly communication that we changed to bi-weekly, and we tried to do it. And some of the timed messaging of just, your ergonomics from working from home, stress management, wellness, like kind of timing those out based on where people were at as this has evolved.
Great. Well, I really want to thank my colleagues from Tennessee, Colorado, and Vermont for participating today, sharing their lessons and struggles and excitements about how we're moving forward in all of this. We had some questions we didn't quite get to. We'll look at trying to set up a forum where we can continue this discussion, bring in more people and more experience, and what's going to be a continuing set of issues for all of us to grasp in the future. I appreciate so much all of you who participated today. I hope you found this helpful and will be able to take this back to your organization. As I said, we'll be sending out a follow-up, so you'll get a direct link to this presentation. Hopefully you'll be able to share it more with your colleagues, start your own internal conversations, and we can continue this online in the new year. So on behalf of the National Network for the Transportation Workforce, thank you all for participating today. Have a great rest of the week and a good new year. Goodbye for now.
Bye.